Thanks, Edward, for putting this together and having this forum where we can all, in the different programs. Oftentimes we don't get a chance. I'm new, as Edward said, but it's really nice to have this opportunity to connect with other colleagues and talk about issues of common interest. Edward kind of set up some things just that I was going to talk about, and in general, what I was hoping for in this sort of forum. I don't really have a coherent set of thoughts. I have a bunch of ideas that I've sort of jotted down, and I'll kind of jump from the personal reflection and talk about some professional implications. From a basic standpoint, I am an American. I'm born and raised in the States. I am from California, more or less, and I was actually not in the country during 9/11 when it happened. I was actually living abroad. I was doing a stint in the U.S. Peace Corps in the country of Kazakhstan. And it was far away from, it wasn't really near the bombing when the bombing started in Afghanistan, but we were concerned about it, not only just as world citizens, but just, hey, this is not that far from us. But it was interesting, I think, that could be another discussion, but coming back home, I think what really hit me, and friends and family would tell me at home that things have changed. The flag is everywhere. The Stars and Stripes is flying at every home. Places that once in a while you'd see it on national holidays. There's that strong nationalistic sense in the States around things like July 4th, et cetera. But this is really new. And the fact is, and I think for me, my family's of Indian ancestry. And I'm not a Muslim Indian. My family's Hindu, but regardless, that's moot. That's besides the point. But what the perception that I had of being kind of this quote-unquote model minority in the States, this discourse that happens around a lot of Asian Americans, Indians, Chinese, et cetera, I think kind of numbed me or didn't make me as aware, I think, of some of the racial baggage in the States. And I think that friends told me, I had an Afghan friend, a close childhood friend of mine, and I had emailed him and he talked to me after 9/11 happened, and he was saying, yeah, like I don't tell anybody I'm from Afghanistan. Like I get dirty looks from people, give me dirty looks right after 9/11 happened. And I knew that. Can people hear me in the back? So basically, it was interesting to feel that as a group, suddenly I am profiled. The people of my background are part, getting the extra security check right after 9/11 when I'd come back to the country. So just to put that in context, how I started thinking about this, and I'd come back and I started a degree in this master's in library information science at UCLA, and then continued with my PhD. But coming from this U.S. context, and I'll kind of switch now to sort of how I saw this response to 9/11 and this context 9/11 in the professional and the library information science field was that, especially in the U.S. with the passage of the U.S. Patriot Act, it was a real issue of concern for librarians. And a lot of activism developed around the Patriot Act and what people saw as this intrusion of the FBI in getting records, getting patron records. And associations, professional associations like the American Library Association were quite active in having a voice and trying to at least discuss and raise the problematic of what there's an intellectual freedom or a right to read ethic in the library world, and that this is being challenged. That somebody from the FBI can come and say, I want to see what somebody has read as potential or suspected terrorists. So that right away, I think when I started my master's, that was an issue that was hot. It was 2002, and it was something that continues to this day as the Patriot Act has been re-upped again, and it's still an evolving area. And it was heartening in a way to see this activism develop around that. And I'm always going to say I'm talking from the U.S. context, but I think perhaps we can extend some of these to Canada. But from my way of framing and looking at the war on terror, we have to think of it also in these sort of twin issues of, I talked about civil liberties infringements broadly. We're talking about all these various intrusions into privacy, things which would be manifested in this issue with the library records and wanting to know that, but also in this increasing nativism and xenophobia that's happening in the States. And if people watch the Lou Dobbs show on CNN just for kicks. Yeah, I just happened to be, usually I'm flipping through, and I happened to watch him last night, and it's this discourse of, you know, broken borders, and like every show that he has is about another. It's basically these twin fears, the fear of the Muslim and the fear of the Mexican. You know, and God forbid if you're both a Muslim, if you're Muslim Mexican, I don't know. But it's, you know, he had this thing right now, it's outrage. I mean, he's standing up for the everyman in this outrage that how can the governor of New York give driver's licenses to these illegals? It's total nonsense. So there's this real vitriol, and it's interesting to see that you know, these issues are related. I mean, it's sort of this entrenchment, this kind of Fortress America idea that we should have these impenetrable borders in the south and also in the north, that, you know, all these terrorists, Al-Qaeda is going to come through the Arizona desert. I don't think, if you've seen people who come through the desert, I don't think that's a reality. But you're seeing, you know, this discourse emerging, which is interesting. And I think in our professional practice, we're talking about public libraries. You know, there has been some mobilization, and throughout the years too, thinking about what are services for immigrant communities, and how can libraries, you know, service communities that have these needs, and potentially, you know, illegal people in the U.S. But it's something that's still evolving as well. And the library is a public institution, or a public library is a public institution, talking about, and there's a whole talk about, you know, what sort of services should these illegals get, and these people who shouldn't be in the States. And so we can extend that to the public library. Should public library services be extended to these people who have been branded as illegals? Now, just things to think about. And I think that within the library world too, we talk about links to democracy and civic activism, and I think we have to really critically examine that, especially in these times when maybe there are these kind of entrenching state mentalities of othering people and you know, enforcing the law. And what is the role of, you know, somebody who's getting, if you're a public librarian, you're getting paid, you know, government money or taxpayer money to serve the public? What is your role within that context? So in terms also, just now kind of step away from that immediate aftermath of 9/11, I think that it's interesting just to think about too some of the encroaching kind of business culture and customer-based models in the library world, and it's these ethics of consumerism and trying to transform services like, say, a public service like libraries into some of these more customer-based models. While it might seem maybe detached from what we're talking about, the war on terror, I think that we have to think about these things a little bit more in a more related way, that the expansion of global capitalism and this war on terror often go hand in hand. And I haven't read the Naomi Klein book, The Shock Doctrine, I think it's called, but similar types of ideas. And I think that just sort of opening it up to how we think about information. And a lot of times I think even within our profession in library information studies, that there's sometimes this emphasis on this idea of information that's often a concept of information that's very scientific or scientistic or technocratic, and it's stripped from culture and context and community. And are libraries really about information? Is it really just about providing that information, or is it, you know, we'll argue that no, obviously there are many other factors involved, but if we start reducing services to these sorts of business type models where it's just information, a lot of this public service ethic about these critical reflexive questions can be asked or not necessarily going to be part of the equation. And then, you know, it's just part of this larger neoliberal state discourse of this erosion of public services. And then just as sort of a thought, and we can pick this up in the discussion, but I think coming off the job market, and I'm a fresh hire, and I've kind of been around and seen a lot of the other schools within my field in library information studies, and there's been a long trend for the past 15 years or so that a lot of these library schools have been shut down because, you know, libraries are irrelevant, right? It's all about information. So you're seeing this trend now where this movement called the information school. And I think we need to really interrogate, you know, what is this information school? It tends to be dominated, from my understanding, by a lot of these business school ethics, computer science, a lot more technocratic perspective of what information is, and exploring some of these links. We're talking about war on terror. What about increased military spending, military-industrial complex? There's a need for information management and various forms of knowledge management within these structures. And I don't have a lot of evidence on this. I think it's an interesting link to think about. I know some anecdotally, but it's something I think that we have to think about also in the education field, and where, if we're talking about the future of FIMS and opening up that discussion, where does FIMS sit within this type of larger information school movement? So I'll kind of just lay these points out, and I'll sort of leave it at that, and then we can pick some of them up in the discussion.
Thank you, Ajit.